The bench at Maple Grove. The morning sun slanted through the thinning trees of Maple Grove Park, casting golden light on the worn walking paths. Autumn had settled in, soft and slow, painting the world in russet and amber. At the far end of the park, beneath an old oak tree, sat a bench that had been claimed, unofficially, by one man. Walter Monroe, 78 years old and sharp as ever, sat with his back straight, a thermos of lukewarm coffee in hand. Every morning, without fail, he came here. Same time, same spot. It wasn't just routine, it was ritual. His cane rested beside him, barely needed most days, but always there like an old friend. He wore a navy windbreaker zipped halfway up, a baseball cap with a faded Detroit Tigers logo, and a pair of sneakers more suited for nostalgia than speed. Walter didn't come for the exercise, not primarily. He came for the stillness. He watched people pass. Some waved, most didn't. But Walter saw them all: young parents pushing strollers, retirees walking dogs, kids cutting through on their way to the nearby high school. He saw the seasons in their faces. Today, a familiar figure jogged toward him. Young woman, probably late 20s. Long ponytail, earbuds in. She always passed around this time. To his surprise, she slowed down near the bench. "You're here every morning," she said, pulling out one earbud and catching her breath. "Mind if I sit?" Walter smiled, scooting over. "Bench doesn't belong to me." The tree might disagree, though. She laughed and sat beside him, wiping sweat from her brow. "I'm Melissa." "Walter," he said, offering his hand. She shook it. "You always here this early?" she asked, stretching her legs out. "Every day, rain or shine, even snow. Helps me think. Helps me stay alive in more ways than one." She glanced at him. "You make it look easy. Getting older." "I mean," Walter chuckled, "it's not easy, but it's not supposed to be. It's just real. You don't fight it. You work with it." Melissa looked back out over the park, thoughtful. "Guess I never thought about that," she said quietly. "I'm always rushing, always trying to stay ahead of time. I forget it's okay to slow down." Walter took a sip of coffee and looked at her kindly. Slowing down doesn't mean stopping. Sometimes, that's when you finally start to see clearly. The breeze picked up, rustling the orange leaves above them. For a while, neither of them said a word. It was the beginning of something unexpected, an exchange of stories, years, and lessons. The art of moving forward. The next morning, Melissa showed up again. This time, she brought 2 paper cups from the coffee shop on Main. "Thought I'd return the favor," she said, handing one to Walter with a small smile. He took it, nodding. "Much better than the motor oil I bring from home." They sat quietly for a while, watching the park come alive, squirrels darting through leaves, kids chasing each other across the grass, the slow rhythm of another day. "So," Melissa said, sipping, "tell me your secret." Walter raised a brow. "Secret to what?" "Staying healthy, looking calm, not yelling at the sky every time your back hurts." Walter laughed, full, hearty. "Oh, I yell. I just do it on the inside now." Then he grew thoughtful. "But if you really want to know, I move every day. Not like I used to, but enough. I stretch. I walk. I eat things that grow from the ground, not things that come in a box. And I don't poison my mind with too much news or worry." Melissa nodded, her face softening. "I've been eating cereal for dinner and doom scrolling myself into panic attacks. So, I guess I'm on the other end of the spectrum." Walter looked over at her kindly. "There's time to change that. You're young, but don't wait until your body forces you to slow down. Choose to slow down now." Melissa thought about that as a breeze rustled the trees again. "I used to run because I loved it," she said. "Now I run because I feel like I'm behind on everything. My job, my life. Like I'm trying to catch up to someone who never stops moving." Walter nodded. You're chasing someone who doesn't exist. She looked at him. You think you're racing time, he said. But time's not your enemy. It's your teacher. That line landed. Melissa didn't respond right away. Walter leaned back, staring into the canopy above. My wife, Eleanor, used to say aging was just another kind of becoming. She walked every morning, stretched every night, drank her tea. She treated her body like it was her oldest companion, not a thing to conquer, but to care for. Melissa smiled softly. She sounds like she was wise. She was, Walter said, his eyes warming at the memory. And she was right. You don't stay young by fighting age. You stay alive by befriending it. The wind kicked up again. Leaves danced across the path like sparks. Melissa looked at her sneakers. Maybe it's time I stop running from something and start walking towards something. Walter smiled. Now that's a good start. Stoic calm and chocolate cake. It was a rainy Thursday when Melissa showed up at Walter's porch, holding a Tupperware container and wearing a look that said, I'm fine, even though her eyes said otherwise. Walter opened the door in his flannel shirt and slippers, surprised but not displeased. Didn't expect to see you today. I, made cake, she said, holding out the container. My grandmother's recipe. Figured you might be the only person who remembers what homemade tastes like. He chuckled, stepping aside. You came to the right place. And you picked the perfect day for it. His home was cozy, full of books, framed photos, and the soft scent of cedar. Melissa sat at the kitchen table while Walter poured tea. They cut into the cake, dense, moist, rich with cocoa and nostalgia. Not bad, Walter said after a bite. You might just be onto something here. She gave a small laugh, but it faded quickly. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her napkin. You ever have one of those weeks, she said, where it feels like everything's closing in? Work's a mess, I fought with my sister, and my rent's going up again. I feel like I'm being squeezed from all sides. Walter nodded slowly, letting her speak. I try so hard to control things, she added, voice smaller now. But life keeps yanking the rug. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached behind him, pulling a thin, dog-eared book off a shelf. He slid it across the table. The cover read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, he said, but also a man who knew how little he could actually control. He believed in focusing only on what you can manage, your choices, your reactions. Melissa picked up the book. Stoicism? Walter nodded. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being anchored, calm in the storm, learning to let go of what was never yours to hold. Melissa sighed. That sounds impossible. It's not, he said gently. It takes practice. But so does everything that matters. You don't learn patience in peace. You learn it in chaos. Outside, the rain drummed softly against the windows. Melissa looked around the kitchen. Everything about the space felt intentional, quiet, lived in, like a life that had been handled with care, not rushed through. She took another bite of cake. You're kind of like a lighthouse, she said. Walter raised an eyebrow. How so? You don't try to steer the ship. You just shine. He smiled, genuinely touched. And in that simple moment, over chocolate cake and ancient philosophy, something in Melissa began to shift. Family dinners and gentle strength. It was Sunday afternoon when Melissa brought someone new to Walter's porch, a wiry teenager with headphones around his neck and suspicion in his eyes. This is Liam, Melissa said. My younger brother. He didn't want to come. I still don't, Liam muttered. Walter opened the door wider. Well, we've got lasagna. If that doesn't change your mind, I've got a back porch full of silence you can sulk in. Liam blinked, then cracked a reluctant smirk. Fair enough. Inside, the table was already set. Walter had cooked a layered, slightly lopsided lasagna and a bowl of Caesar salad. Melissa brought iced tea. The three of them sat around the old wooden table, the kind that remembered holidays. Spilled gravy, and years of elbows resting in thought. For a while, they ate quietly. Then Walter spoke. "You know, I used to teach kids your age," he said, glancing at Liam. "English, mostly. They thought Shakespeare was boring. They were wrong." Liam rolled his eyes, but said nothing. "You know what Shakespeare understood better than most adults?" Walter asked. Melissa looked curious. Liam shrugged. "That the real battles happen in here," Walter said, tapping his chest. "Not out there. Growing up means learning how to fight with your heart without losing it." Liam gave a little snort. "Sounds exhausting." Walter smiled. "It is, but it's worth it." Melissa nudged her brother. "You know, not everything has to be a fight. Sometimes it's okay to just let things be." Liam picked at his salad, voice quieter now. "Hard to do that when everything feels like it's falling apart." Walter leaned forward, his tone gentle. "You know what's stronger than people give credit for? Gentle things. A tree bends in the wind and still stands. Water moves around rock and still wears it down." Liam looked up at him. That landed somewhere deep. After dinner, they sat on the porch with mugs of tea. Walter let the silence stretch, knowing not all lessons need words. Eventually, Liam said, "You think it gets easier? Being okay with everything?" Walter shook his head. "No, but you get stronger. And wiser. And you stop needing to be okay with everything. You just need to be okay with yourself in the middle of it." Liam nodded slowly, the headphones around his neck forgotten for now. As the sky turned lavender with the setting sun, Melissa looked over at Walter and felt something unshakable. This quiet dinner, this shared wisdom, this porch, was becoming a second kind of home. The quiet power of looking back. A week passed before Melissa returned, this time alone. She carried a small notebook in her hand, pages slightly bent from overuse. Walter was already on the porch, sipping from a blue mug. "You look like you've been thinking hard," he said as she sat down. "I have," Melissa admitted. "I started journaling. Like, really journaling. Not just to vent, but to understand." Walter's eyes twinkled. "That's how it starts." She pulled the notebook onto her lap, fingers tracing the spine. "You ever do that? Write things down just for yourself?" Walter nodded. "Every day. And my wife Eleanor, she did too. Religious about it. After she passed, I found a whole drawer full of her journals. Years of thoughts, prayers, fears, joys. It was like reading the secret map of her soul." Melissa leaned forward. "Did it help you? Reading them?" "More than I expected," he said. "It reminded me of all the moments we forget too quickly. Like how she used to leave sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. Or how she cried quietly during certain songs." He stood and walked inside for a moment, returning with a small leather-bound book. "This one's from the fall before she got sick," he said, placing it in Melissa's hands. "Go ahead. Read a page." Melissa opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat, graceful. The entry was dated October 12th. "Today, Walter and I walked the old trail near Willow Creek. He picked a wildflower and tucked it behind my ear. He's never said he's afraid of losing me, but I can feel it in the way he holds my hand. Still, I'm not scared. I'm grateful. Every moment is a little infinity." Melissa blinked back tears. "She was beautiful. She was real," Walter said softly. "And she understood something most people take a lifetime to learn, that reflection gives meaning to the chaos." Melissa sat quietly, holding the journal like it was made of glass. "I've spent so much time trying to get ahead," she said. "But maybe I've been missing the point. Maybe the gold's in the moments we don't try to rush past." Walter nodded. "That's wisdom, kiddo. And it doesn't just come with age. It comes with attention." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the notebook's pages as if Eleanor herself was nodding in agreement. Melissa looked up. "You think it's okay to write even if no one ever reads it?" Walter smiled. "Especially then. Because that means you're writing for the one person who matters most, yourself. The last chapter. Not the end." It was late November when Melissa noticed Walter walking slower, leaning a little heavier on his cane. The cold had settled in. The trees in Maple Grove were bare now, their skeletons outlined in soft gray against a pale sky. One afternoon, she brought him soup and a warm wool scarf. "You're spoiling me," Walter said, his voice rough but amused. "Next thing I know, you'll be knitting me socks." Melissa grinned. "I might if you stop pretending you're not tired." He didn't argue. They sat together by the window this time, looking out at the street as soft snow began to fall. A long, easy silence passed before Melissa asked something she'd been holding in for weeks. "Are you scared of dying?" Walter didn't flinch. "No," he said after a moment, "but I do think about it. That's part of living." She nodded, waiting. "I've made peace with it," he continued. "Doesn't mean I want to go. But I've lived long enough to know that life isn't about staying. It's about leaving well." Melissa swallowed, her chest tight. "What does that mean, leaving well?" Walter looked at her, his gaze steady. "It means saying what you need to say, forgiving who you need to forgive, letting your loved ones know they're loved, and maybe even writing a few things down so they can still hear your voice when you're gone." Melissa looked at the notebook in her lap. "That's why you told me to write?" Walter nodded. "One day, someone you love might need your words more than your presence." Outside, the snow fell thicker now, quieting the world. Walter's breathing was steady, but slower than before. He looked at her and smiled. "Don't be afraid to talk about the end. It's not a cliff, it's a bend in the road. And sometimes, knowing it's coming makes you love the walk a little more." Melissa wiped her eye, laughing through her tears. "You always know what to say." "Only because I've had time to listen," he said gently. "And I want you to promise something. Anything. When I'm not here anymore, you keep showing up. To this park. To your notebook. To the people you love. You be the one who listens." She nodded, unable to speak. Walter reached over and patted her hand. "Good. Then I'll rest easy when the time comes." A bench that waits in silence. By early spring, Walter's porch was empty. Melissa still walked the park trails every Saturday, as they used to. But now she stopped at the old wooden bench overlooking the pond, the one where Walter liked to sit, thermos in hand, legs crossed like a man with all the time in the world. It had been 2 months since he passed. No big announcement. No dramatic hospital scene. Just a quiet night in his sleep, the way he'd hoped for. The town held a small service. Nothing grand, just a gathering of familiar faces, old students, neighbors, and the occasional tearful librarian who recalled his weekly visits. Melissa spoke, hands trembling around a folded piece of paper. She read one of his favorite lines from Eleanor's journal. "To live with presence is to leave without regret." Now each week, Melissa came to the bench and wrote in her own journal. Sometimes it was a full entry, sometimes just a sentence. Today, she wrote, "You were right, Walter. Time isn't something to chase. It's something to welcome. Like an old friend who's always trying to teach you something." She closed the journal and sat back, letting the breeze brush through her hair. Across the pond, a boy rode past on a bike, yelling something joyous to his father. A woman walked a golden retriever. An old couple held hands, just like Walter and Eleanor might have. Melissa smiled. She didn't feel alone. In her tote bag was a well-worn copy of Meditations, some homemade banana bread, and a second notebook, blank, waiting to be filled. She thought about Liam, now applying to college, about her own path, quieter now, but clearer. She didn't need Walter's porch anymore to feel his presence, because the bench remembered. And so did she, living forward with wisdom. Melissa stood at the community center bulletin board, pinning up a flyer she'd designed herself. Letters to Tomorrow, a journaling circle for all ages. Come write. Come reflect. Come be still. Every Thursday evening. Tea and quiet included. She stepped back and stared at the flyer, smiling. It wasn't flashy, but it didn't need to be. The people who needed it would find it, just like she had found Walter. The journaling group started small. A retired school teacher, a young mom, a shy college student, a widower who hadn't spoken much since his wife passed. They came, week after week, and wrote. Sometimes they shared, sometimes they didn't. Melissa didn't lead like a teacher. She guided like a gardener, creating space, letting things grow. At the center of the table was a single worn copy of Meditations and a notebook with the initials WE embossed on the cover. People flipped through it now and then, leaving their own notes in the margins, almost like a dialogue across time. One night, Liam stopped by. Thought I'd see what this was all about, he said. Shuffling awkwardly, she handed him a notebook and a pen. Sit wherever you want. No pressure. He didn't say much, but when the timer chimed, she noticed his hand was still moving, writing faster than he could think. That night, he hugged her for the first time in months. Months later, Melissa found herself walking the old trail near Willow Creek, where Walter once picked a wildflower for Eleanor. She paused at the spot, kneeling to pick a single violet bloom. Then, opening her journal, she wrote, "The most beautiful wisdom isn't loud. It's the kind that walks beside you, asks nothing, and reminds you that you're already enough. Thank you, Walter, for teaching me how to live, not just long, but well." The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the grass. She stood, pressed the flower between the pages, and walked on steadier now, not because the road was easier, but because she'd learned how to walk it with grace.